Today I'm going to teach you how to fix an overcarbonated beer, and I'm going to do it for both a keg and for a bottle. So let me show you what an overcarbonated beer looks like. Usually when I carbonate the beer well, I get a nice pour on my glasses, but when the beer's overcarbonated, I get this foam that just basically takes over the beer. So it makes serving a beer almost impossible when you have an overcarbonated beer. So as you can see, you pretty much get almost nothing but foam, right? So that's an overcarbonated beer coming from the keg. Same thing happens with a bottle. Now for this, since I know it's gonna make a mess, I'm gonna go inside and show you what happens when you have an overcarbonated beer from a bottle, but I also wanna point out the difference between having an overcarbonated beer and having a gusher. A gusher basically is a beer that has been infected by wild yeast. So let me go ahead and show you what this looks like, just so you have a little bit of a reference point. All right, let's go inside. So as you can see, serving a beer from a bottle that's overcarbonated is a little bit hard. And now, the difference between a beer that's overcarbonated and one that has wild yeast is, if you look at the quality of the foam, you can see that the foam is staying and it's not just dissipating like soda. You can see going from little bubbles to bigger bubbles, which is usually a good indication of good quality foam. So let's go ahead and head back outside. So as you can see, having an overcarbonated beer is usually not a good thing, because if you remember this glass, I left it sitting while I went out and poured this beer. Look at how much of it was foam, and I only ended up pouring about that much. So, I mean, the beer's still good, but it's just hard to serve. Same thing with a beer like this. I mean, it's nice to have a high carbonated beer, but it's not good when you have it to the point where as soon as you pop it open, the foam just basically spits out because there's just so much. So what we want to do in both of these cases, both the keg and the bottle, is we want to reduce the amount of carbonation in the beer. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to show you how I do it in the keg first, just to kind of like explain the theory behind this. So what we have to do is normally in a keg setup, we have pressure being applied through the manifold and into our keg. Now, in a keg, all we have to do is we just release pressure from the keg. Just like that. So basically what just happened, and I'm going to explain everything with the bottle because it's essentially the same thing. In the keg, if this were to be the keg, you have this much beer, and then there's always a little bit of headspace. And the way that carbonation works is that there's usually CO2 in the headspace, and if you want to picture that CO2, it's putting pressure down on CO2 that's dissolved into the beer. So when I release the pressure, all of the CO2 that's in the headspace just goes out. So all that CO2 that was putting pressure in the beer is no longer going to be putting pressure into the beer, which means that the CO2 that's in the beer is going to come out of the beer and it's going to fill the headspace. And what that's going to do is it's going to take some of the CO2 that's been dissolved in the beer into the headspace, and it's going to do it until enough CO2 builds up in the headspace to put pressure back and keep CO2 in the beer. So that's what's going to happen with the keg. And the way that you want to go about this is you want to release the pressure and then just let it sit. let it sit. Have your kegerator set at whatever pressure you need it to set, so the system is balanced and so that it's carbonated where it needs to be. And you're gonna have to come back every hour, maybe 2 hours, to allow the CO2 that's dissolved in the beer to exit the beer, fill out the headspace, and put pressure and kind of reach that equilibrium. So the same thing is what we're gonna do with our bottles. Now, I've read, when I did a lot of research about how to fix carbonated beers, a lot of the advice that I was getting was that, I need a break. A lot of the advice that I was reading was that brewers would just untap the bottles and cap them right back in. The problem with that is, if you saw when I poured this beer, as soon as I popped it open, foam just started spitting out, and it's just so messy. It's just not the way that I want to fix the carbonated bottles. So the trick with a bottle is you want to take a bottle opener. The longer it is, the better. You don't want a small bottle opener. You want something that gives you a lot of leverage. So a bottle opener that's, like something like this, or one of these wine, anything that's long that gives you a lot of leverage, that's what's going to be the best for this kind of thing. And what you want to do is you want to just slightly pry the bottle cap, and you're going to hear the hissing sound. Put it near to the microphone. So you're going to hear that hissing sound, and you're going to notice that there's going to be foam building up on the headspace, and that's basically carbon dioxide leaving the beer trying to fill the headspace, right? So notice that when I pried this open, I didn't bend the cap and I didn't really open, so it's just prying it just slightly, which is why one of these long bottle openers works best for this, because you want to just do it very, very, very slightly. And you want to just do that, do as much as you can without actually opening the cap and without getting a lot of, as long as you don't get foam spitting out, then you're doing it right. If you do it too much, you're going to see foam coming out of the cap, depending on how carbonated your beer is. So you just want to do it just very, very slightly. And you're going to get to a point where there's almost no CO2 coming out, but that doesn't mean that there's none. What you got to do at that point is, just like the keg, you want to let the beer sit and come back in about an hour or two, and just do that. I don't know, it depends on how carbonated your beer is. You may have to do that about 4, 5, 6 times. It just depends. But basically what's happening is you're releasing CO2 from the headspace, which is reducing the amount of CO2 that's in the beer, filling out the headspace, and then you're just repeating that process until you have the desired amount of carbon dioxide dissolved into the beer. Okay, so I ended up degassing this beer about 4 times. Some of them I did about 5 times. I kind of gauged how much gas there was still in the beer as I was degassing them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what the beer pours like after you have reached essentially the right amount of carbonation. So I don't have to worry anymore about the beer just pouring out of the bottle like I was when I was first serving them, as you saw earlier in the video. And now I have a very well carbonated beer that I can actually pour into a glass and get a pretty decent amount of head formation, even after I've released quite a bit of carbonation. And you can see that the foam stays in pretty well. It's very, very healthy foam. So that tells you that this beer is not a gusher, that it's just an overcarbonated beer. And the way that you fix it is the same way that I fix the kegs whenever I overshoot my carbonation, when I force carbonate them and I crank up the pressure and leave it sitting for a little bit too long. All you have to do is release the valve from the kegs until you reach the right amount of carbonation in the beer. And it's the same exact concept that you apply when using bottles. And all you have to do is do the little trick that I showed you, where you barely pry open the cap just to let CO2 and have your bottle cap ready to reseal the bottle. And you know, as long as you do that, you're gonna get a nice you know, carbonated beer. And this is and I hope this is good. I hope this helps you understand what carbonation is all about. And you know, this is how you fix an overcarbonated beer, both from a bottle and from a keg. Don't forget to like, comment, share this video, embed it in your blog, wherever, and just let me know what you think. Cheers.